For years, we've been warning on this show that the establishment will do anything to get their power back. Trump's new conservative populism, pro-business on tax and regulation, pro-worker on trade and immigration, reversed decades of wage stagnation for working Americans and brought us historically low unemployment. But the establishment hated it. Corporate America hated it. It's the exact opposite of their ideology, globalism. To them, the idea of putting America first is uncouth, embarrassing. Their priority is not improving the lives of American workers and families, but winning the approval of their friends in the elite by reciting the correct mantras on the climate crisis, systemic racism and inequality. Preferably by taking private jets to conferences at luxury resorts where the liberal white bosses are waited on by people of color. Underpinning this entire elitist establishment is the swamp. The swamp is what makes it all work. Big business in bed with big government, the revolving door between the two, lobbying, influence peddling, whining and dining. You could call it structural corruption. And ever since he got into the presidential race, we've been telling you that Joe Biden is the swamp. But it's hard to believe how openly and comprehensively he's now proving just how right we were. Last week, we showed you his so-called transition team crawling with swamp lobbyists and corporate cronies from big tech and big business. Tonight, we'll bring you details you have not seen reported anywhere else about Biden's scheme to bring the swamp directly into the White House at the highest level. He wants to do it in the form of this man, Steve the Swamp Ricchetti. Ricchetti was named this week as counselor to the president on a chart in which Biden grandly announced his White House senior staff. Ricchetti is a living, breathing example of everything that is corrupt and broken in our government. It's so disgusting that even fellow Democrats wanted to stop Biden bringing him in. Even Elizabeth Warren has warned against him. Back in 2008, President Obama's top aides blocked Steve Ricchetti from being hired, but Joe Biden was so desperate to have his corrupt crony by his side that he found a loophole, and Ricchetti ended up as Vice President Biden's chief of staff. Ricchetti's swamp career started in the late 80s when he began running the lobbying department for the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Then he went on to be the executive director of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee before joining the Clinton administration in 1992. And guess what he did there? This man, Ricchetti, who Biden, working-class Joe from Scranton, Pennsylvania, champion of blue-collar America, the man that Biden wants right by his side in the White House, is the very same man who bullied Democrats in Congress into voting for NAFTA, resulting in the collapse of American manufacturing and the shipping of millions of jobs overseas. Once Ricchetti was done selling out American workers, he cashed in on his public service by selling his government contacts and experience to the highest bidder with a new lobbying firm that he opened along with his brother, Jeff, Ricchetti and Associates. Remind you of anything? Two brothers, well-connected Washington insiders, part of the corrupt Clinton gang, opening a swamp lobbying firm with their name above the door. Yep, just like the Podestas. And would you believe it, the Ricchettis ended up selling their sleazy firm to the Podesta's sleazy firm, and the two sets of brothers shared the spoils. Jeff Ricchetti went on to work for Tony Podesta on the outside, while Steve Ricchetti went back into the White House to work for John Podesta. Isn't that neat? In fact, at the time, Tony Podesta even compared this rotten quartet to the Medici family who ruled Italy in the Renaissance, saying, quote, "The Medicis controlled everything. We have it split into two families." Have you ever heard anything so nauseatingly arrogant? The government's supposed to work for you, the American people. But for Washington's insular ruling elite, government is just an opportunity to make themselves rich and powerful. In the election campaign, we called it Bidenomics. You get poorer, they get richer. That is Steve Ricchetti's core belief system. He wasn't done screwing American workers with NAFTA. There were millions more manufacturing jobs he could send away, thousands of working-class communities across the heartland that he could hollow out and destroy. In 2000, before leaving the White House, it was Steve Ricchetti who led the charge in getting China admitted to the WTO. Yeah, that deal. probably the single most destructive act of economic self-harm in American history. So, NAFTA and China. Nice work, Steve the Swamp. Once his dirty work in the Clinton White House was done, well, you can guess the next part. It was time for the Ricettis to cash out. They started another lobbying firm, Riccetti Inc. And you can guess who hired them, a laundry list of corporate America's biggest names. Telecoms companies like AT&T, Siemens, Sprint and Nextel, pharma companies like Pfizer, Eli Lilly and Novartis, insurance associations, hospital trade groups, even tech companies like eBay, and of course, the military-industrial complex with defense contractors like United Technologies. In 2008, Steve Riccetti went back into the bowels of Clinton Inc., bundling donations for Hillary's first failed presidential campaign. After she lost, he eventually managed to worm his way into the Obama administration, skirting new ethics rules by deregistering as a lobbyist and rebranding himself an advisor. That's the Democrat way. You lobby, but I advise. In fact, despite deregistering as a lobbyist and without signing an ethics waiver, Riccetti still managed to rake in $1.8 million from his lobbying firm in 2011, dwarfing his income as a White House official. And after sneaking Riccetti in a year later in 2013, he took over as Vice President Biden's chief of staff, where he remained for the duration of the Obama administration. All while his brother Jeff continued his lobbying through Riccetti Inc. Oh, but I'm sure there was no special access right. No way that swamp lobbyist Jeff Riccetti would in any way benefit from the fact that his brother Steve was the vice president's chief of staff. I mean, that kind of thing would never happen around Joe Biden, who always insists on a strict separation between government business and family interests. And of course, there's absolutely no connection at all, obviously, between the fact that Jeff Riccetti's lobbying business later saw a massive spike in business just as his brother Steve the Swamp became chairman of Biden's presidential campaign in 2019. New clients picked up by the Biden campaign. Sorry, Riccetti Inc. It's so easy to get confused, including multinational corporations in big tech and big pharma. Clients like GlaxoSmithKline, a British pharma giant and one of the most heavily fined drug companies in the world. In 2012, they were fined $3 billion in one settlement alone for bribing doctors to prescribe antidepressants to children. Or clients like Applied Materials, which sells semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China, helping the Chinese military produce precision weapons. But that's fine because, well, Joe China, I guess. President Trump completely reoriented the West's policy towards China after 50 years of establishment suck-up that put China on the brink of world domination. We are finally standing up to them. But now we're seeing ominous reports that Biden wants to roll it all back. On day one, according to Axios, Biden wants re-engagement. He wants to unwind Trump-era actions, to reverse the crackdown on China's spying, to remove restrictions on Chinese journalists in the US. This is the establishment agenda. This is the big business agenda. And Biden wants Steve the Swamp Riccetti right there in the Oval Office pushing it. For years, conservatives may have thought positively of corporate America. We're pro-business, right? Yes, we are. But we are pro-real business, not these giant global bureaucracies that corporate America has become. We are pro-small business, pro-entrepreneur. Conservatives need to wake up. Corporate America is not your friend. Just since the election, not just Facebook and Twitter, but big businesses including Airbnb, PayPal and Target have attacked conservatives. Corporate America looks down on you. Corporate America censors you. Corporate America hates you. And now, corporate America wants even more power over you by putting its stooge in the White House. Steve the Swamp Riccetti, a godfather of NAFTA, an agent for China, a corrupt swamp lobbyist who got rich off pretending to work for you. He is a symbol of everything that's wrong with our system. His presence in the White House would be a stain on our democracy. It would be wrong and unacceptable, and we must not let it happen. We must stop the Biden swamp.